Hello YouTube, and welcome to my review of the Battlefield 4 grenades. I've unlocked all of them and tried each of them out, and in this video I'll be passing on my observations and tips to you. For the tutorial on the best way to unlock the grenades, see my next video, which should be uploaded within 24 hours. Link in the description and in an annotation at the end of this video. Now, as much as I'd like the many views and ad revenue of Battlefield 4 fanboys flocking to my channel, I'd need to make a sensationalistic review praising Battlefield 4 for its innovation, whether it's true or not. And the fact of the matter is that some of these grenades are fail sauce. Several of them have incredibly limited use and aren't really worth carrying. You start with the M67 frag grenade unlocked. By default, you can only carry one. It should be noted that the M67 is the only grenade that does enough damage to kill full health enemies. Overall, it is a pretty standard, generic frag grenade. However, the first grenade you unlock after a few kills is the V40 Mini, which can be tossed at a significantly longer range, and you get 3 of them. The V40 Mini has a pretty big blast radius and will chop off about 80% of your target's hit points. So in many cases, the V40s are better than the normal frag grenades, given that if an enemy is slightly damaged, a V40 will probably kill them, and the fact that you have 3 means that the total damage output of the V40s is over double that of a normal frag grenade. One should note, though, that the throwing trajectory of these grenades is different from that of the normal frag grenade because they're tossed at such a long range, and if you've already gotten used to the default grenade, you may find yourself accidentally bouncing these off walls for a while. As for which one is better, while statistically speaking the V40s are more versatile, but on the other hand the M67s, due to being heavier, can be lobbed up at something easier in some situations. So to be fair, both have their pros and cons, and it'll depend a little bit on where you're going to be fighting. If there's a lot of low rooftops in range of a normal grenade, then maybe the M67 is the better choice. If you're running around on those rooftops and lobbing grenades at long range, maybe the V40s will be better. If you're choosing between using the M67 or the V40, really it's going to come down to personal preference and what location you're in. As for the RGO impact grenades, they're a whole different story. Despite the fact that you only get 2 instead of 3 like the V40s, they have a smaller blast radius with larger damage fall-off and do less damage on the whole. All of this in return for the ability to detonate shortly after landing. And really I don't think it's a very good trade. Carrying less, and doing less damage, and having a lower blast radius doesn't seem like a really good side grade to me. One might try to rationalize that you can time the detonation a little better, but really the purpose of timing that detonation will usually be to prevent an enemy from escaping the blast radius, or in trying to throw a grenade onto a rooftop. The risk of the grenade detonating before it lands is usually only a factor at longer ranges, and in this particular case, that blast radius is almost harmless. They also don't damage vehicles, so I figure you're really out of justification to use the RGOs. You can make sure it reaches where you're throwing it, sure, but the blast is significantly less dangerous than either the M67 or the V40. You're trying to secure a blast radius hit, but that blast radius isn't very scary. I feel the times where you'd prefer the precise detonation timer of the RGOs compared to the blast radius of the M67 or the V40 will be far and few between. This, combined with having less than the V40s, makes me say pass on the RGOs. A little more control to your detonation timer isn't worth such a massive reduction to its killing power. The M34 incendiary grenades aren't in much better position. You only get 1 by default, and they're completely unable to kill you. I tried repeatedly both on camera and off to suicide, and they aren't able to kill a full health target, even when that target intentionally sits in the fire for its full duration. And you can't argue that they're good for keeping people off of rush objectives, such as disarming an MCOM, because they'd only be lethal to a damaged target, and they also burn for such a short duration that if you just chucked 2 of your 3 V40 mini grenades at the target, you'd be able to keep people away from the MCOM more efficiently than the incendiary grenade would. I feel this grenade needs a buff. In the case of the RGOs, I say they don't offer a worthwhile trade to give up the M67 or the V40 minis, but in the case of the incendiary grenades, they're just bad. There's nothing that the incendiary grenade can do that something else can't do better. As for the M18 smoke grenade, you have 3 by default, and they provide the standard smoke grenade utility value. If you don't want to play Assault to get smoke screens, then these are your alternative. The size of the smoke screen is displayed on screen right now. I feel it's better to show you a visual representation so you can see how much space they cover than it is to tell people measurements. If you use all 3 grenades at once, you should be able to set up a decent smoke screen to conceal movement if you want to move across a pathway. Also, I should note that they do block spotting, so you'll find some decent uses for the smoke screens, such as obscuring an area so your team can pass by, or, my favorite use, throwing them in the direction of an enemy squad or a sniper to blind them and advance on their position. All in all, I'd say the smoke grenades are exactly what you'd expect from a smoke grenade, and they do their job properly. Depending on your playstyle, they may be a good addition to your kit. The same, however, cannot be said for the M84 flashbang. It seems that you only get fully affected by the M84 if you're staring directly at it when it explodes, as in, it has to be centered in your crosshair. Even if it's within your field of vision, you don't get full effects from it. It has to be centered in your screen. It doesn't daze you or impair movement in any way, nor does it block spotting. And the flash is so brief, and in most cases will cover too little of your screen, that it's going to be very rare for that blinding effect to actually be more useful to you than just having a normal grenade to throw. They're crap, and they desperately need a buff as much as the equally useless incendiary grenade does. For our final item, we have the hand flare. The hand flare can actually be quite useful, but not for the tooltip reasons. It is rather luminous, but using it to light up a dark area casts very dark shadows on stuff nearby, and an enemy who's holding still won't be illuminated very clearly. In a lot of cases, an enemy in illumination radius, if holding still, will look similar to debris and other random objects on the floor. Sometimes you might get a case where the flare is positioned just right to illuminate an enemy, but these situations seem to be in the minority, and if you wanted to check if an enemy was there, why not just use a V40 mini grenade instead? You have 3 of those and only 2 flares. So lighting up dark areas isn't the primary purpose of the hand flare. I have, however, found them to be much more useful as essentially deployable concealment. The flare does offer a small blinding effect in the area of your screen that the flare is located, and a worse one if you look directly towards it. I found that this can be very useful if you position yourself so that the flare doesn't obscure your vision, but would obscure the vision of someone looking at you, such as setting the flare in front of a couch and hiding behind it so that you aren't blinded, but anyone looking at you would be. Flares last for quite a long time, at least a couple of minutes, so I found them useful to help offer me some concealment while guarding or capturing an objective. In addition, they can be useful to make it harder for someone to see when coming out of a hallway, similar to the use of a smoke grenade. I've also noticed that flares seem to be very distracting for players, and when they see a flare, it seems they tend to look at it or otherwise are surprised by the grenade indicator or some other sort of spook tactic, though this may have reduced usefulness as people get used to seeing flares further on after the release of Battlefield 4. All in all, though, I have found flares quite useful. You just have to know to either put their glare in an area of your screen that you don't need to look at, or put it in front of something that you can hide behind and block line of sight with, or otherwise mold its use to your surroundings, and I'll probably be using them more for a while to see if I can find more creative uses. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the review. Remember to like, favorite, share, and subscribe. I'll see you next time, YouTube.